Hello, hello.
Good morning.
Welcome, everyone.
Oh, good afternoon for you, Ivan. Almost good evening.
It's 3 p.m. over here. So I don't know. I think we've got people from various parts of the world, different time zones coming in. So good to see you all. Hope you're all having a good day. We've got great weather today in London, which is nice. I'm sure there are some people outside, but I'm in the studio, which is where I like to be. So that's all good. First things first, thanks for joining us, and thank you to Freelancer Club for hosting, and particularly to Matt and Natasha for their efforts in organizing this and all of the other events that they've got on during lockdown. And a special thanks to Phil Swallow, who is a fellow photographer here in London, who is manning the controls. So he's going to be muting and unmuting and calling out the most interesting questions from the chat. And Phil, if you don't know him, has got his photography blog, Phil's Photography Journey, which I recommend checking out. Phil, do you want to put a plug in there, put a link in the chat so people can go and have a listen to that? Not right now. Yes. Well, you could put
I'll
the
do
link
it towards the
in right
end
now,
or at some if I find it. Yeah, so it's just charting my journey to becoming a full-time photographer and the fun and joys that I've had on the way, which includes meeting up with Ivan Weiss.
Oh, there you go. No journey's complete without that, right?
Exactly.
on 2 continents, no less.
Yeah.
All right. So I think we're ready to get going if we've got people in there. I can't see the chat very well from here. My eyesight's terrible anyway. Shh, don't tell my clients. It's okay. Autofocus takes care of it. So
photographers don't need
I hope you've all got some questions. I hope you all got some questions. And let's get things going.
An extra headshot crew person.
What have we got, Phil? What do people want to know? What do people want to talk about?
It's a bit light at the moment, so can I ask you one to start with?
Absolutely, of course you
can. And it's these events, Ivan. You've been going public a few times in recent weeks on different platforms. Is there anything that's happened in those events that's made you think about where you may want to go next with your photography and your style? Has anything been piqued by speaking to a big audience out
there? In terms of style, no. I mean, I've had some people telling me that they don't like my work, which is, that's fine. I don't like to hear that. It's not nice, especially if I read those kind of comments before I've had coffee in the morning. Not a good way to start the day. There is something about never read below the line comments, right? But that's part and parcel of it, right? We all put our work out on Instagram or whatever, and you get the odd person who feels the need to tell you that they are disgusted by what you do. So that's not going to change my opinion on how I work and the style that I work in. What has come to mind is more, the idea of developing more the kind of teaching and coaching part of what I do. I really like doing that in person, which right now obviously that's not possible. But once it is, I think I'm going to and producing work.
I've been doing a bit of admin there, muting mics, including yours, Ivan, very briefly. So we've got some questions coming in. Hopefully you can all hear me. So Denise asked, how much business do you get from the headshot crew?
Oh, that's good. That's difficult to quantify. In terms of like direct stuff, direct referrals, I would say of my top 3 paying jobs, or of my top 5 paying jobs last year, 2 of them were direct referrals from people in the headshot crew. It contributes to my SEO, which means that people find me without ever necessarily knowing anything about the headshot crew. So that's a big help. And then, of course, the sort of the support network aspect of it is huge. But in terms of people going to the Headshot Crew website and then booking me, that's a very rare occurrence for me right now. It's more referrals from other photographers who've got clients that are US based, and then they've got maybe a London office, or there's a London event that they want to have a photographer at, and I get the referral from that. But you know, the thing that's always true in terms of SEO is the more platforms you can be on, authoritative platforms that have got value in the photography community, the better. And Headshot Crew is definitely one of the best ones there for you know, my genre of photography.
Thank you. I've got a few more questions coming in now, thick and fast, which is good. You may have shared this before. This is from Eric. What was your journey to photography? How long have you got?
Okay, well, that, yeah. Well, Phil asked me that about a month ago, and it became an hour-long podcast after he'd edited it down, because I just talked for 2 hours. So if you want the full story, go to Phil's Photography Journey podcast, available on all your favorite podcast things. Platforms.
Apple, Stitcher, you name it, it's on there.
But the short answer is, my dad was a photographer, so I grew up with photography sort of around me and in the house, but I didn't pursue it professionally or even as a hobby, really. It was just sort of something that was there until about 2010, when I started getting into it seriously as a hobby. Obviously, when I started when I was a kid, it was analog, so I was, you know, working with film. And then by 2010, it had all gone digital, or mostly, and I kind of got back into it, and it became a hobby, became a serious hobby, became a hobby that I occasionally got paid for, and then eventually, you know, I needed to create more time in my diary for doing photography, so the job just had to go. I think that's a fairly common trajectory for people. I think, Phil, that's kind of broadly similar to you, right?
Yeah, correct. And many others at different stages of our lives. Thanks, Simon. Hopefully that's helped. So, got a specific about when you decided to start using continuous light rather than strobes for portraits, and why? That's from David.
Aha. Okay. So I started off with strobes. I think, you know, generally speaking, it's more economically viable to get into using strobes. Started with, you know, speed lights, and then like Godox AD200s and things like that. And I was aware of the Westcott Flex kits, and yeah, it looked interesting, but I didn't really think that it was going to be a particular benefit to me. But I had an opportunity to use it that was totally unexpected. I went to the Photo Plus Expo in New York a couple of years back, and Peter Hurley had a booth there with a little stage, and he was shooting headshots. And he put me on the camera and just announced over the microphone, you know, Ivan Weiss from London is here. He's going to shoot headshots for anyone that wants one. And it was set up with, you know, his camera and his Flex kit. And I shot about, I don't know, 40 or 50 headshots in, I don't know, 3 hours or something. And I realized the benefit of having continuous light, of being able to see what you're doing before you shoot. You know, in that environment, it's, you know, there's a big screen playing to a room full of photographers. You don't want to mess up any shots. I mean, I did mess up a few, of course, but you know, you want to get your consistency where it needs to be. And continuous light really allows you to do that. And then, of course, when I moved over to a mirrorless camera, where you see the exposure in the viewfinder because it's electronic, even more so, there's a benefit for having continuous light there. I still use strobes on occasions. There are times when I'll choose to use them specifically because they can freeze action, or if I'm going on location, I just don't know what I'm going to be dealing with. Strobe is a sort of probably a lighter, more adaptable thing, but my first preference is continuous. So when I'm in the studio, that will be what I use as the main light. I might chuck a strobe on the background or something if that's what I've got to hand. But it's definitely my first preference now.
Great, thank you. We've got a question from Kerry, and it might be that I'll have to unmute her just in case I don't fully get the gist of this. I'll unmute her anyway.
Yeah, bring on.
Although maybe that hasn't worked. Anyway, I'll ask the question. We'll see how we go. Was there a time in your career when you got hired to photograph one specific area that had different areas of interest, like getting paid for events photography, but doing nature for fun? If so, how did you broaden your professional areas to include all your photography interests?
Right. Luckily for me, no, because I spent a long time where I had a full-time job, and although I was getting paid for photography, I wasn't reliant on it for my income. I managed to avoid ever being in a situation where I kind of needed to take a job that wasn't in the genre that I wanted to work in. I did spend some time at the beginning sort of trying to work out what it was that I wanted to do, and I've shot some events, and I shot a wedding. You know, once was enough for me to realize that's not what I wanted to do professionally, but it wasn't out of sort of necessity that I had to do that. It was just sort of finding out, you know, where I was going as a photographer. And by the time I was reliant on it for my income, I was really dead set on what I wanted to do. And at that point, it made sense also from a marketing point of view to really specialize and say, you know, this is what I offer. If you want newborn photography or landscape photography, people wouldn't even think to come to me for that, because I don't show any work of that nature. I don't have it on my website. I don't have it on my social media. You know, I might do a bit of that for fun, for, you know, wander around with a camera if I've gone somewhere for a weekend, but that's not professional work at all. That's just, you know, sort of thumb twiddling type photography for me.
Okay, thank you. Hopefully, oh, Kerry said thanks, that's good. From Cara, hi Cara. I really want to practice your editing flow, but don't have any images that would work for that look. Would you be willing to share a photo or two for folks to practice on?
Ooh, now that's an idea. I mean, so as a general policy, I don't share unedited work, and you know, the reason for that is it's quality control. Like I like to think of the final edit as being definitive. I quite like that idea that there's, you know, there exists just one version of a thing. That said, there may be some more tutorial type video things in the pipeline, and it's certainly an idea that I could shoot something specifically for that, with the intention of supplying an unedited file for people to use. But I mean, the other complication right now is, you know, if I were to give you a file of something I've already shot, like a client of mine, and I send out a picture to however many other photographers where I haven't removed their nose hair and, you know, all that kind of stuff, I wouldn't do that to a client. It'll probably be a self-portrait if I do that. You can all see my nose hair. I don't mind.
Okay, so from Beth, hi Beth. Ivan, do you think your style of color grading and overall look work mostly with brooding or serious expressions, or would it also work with happier, lighter expressions? What a great question.
Yeah. So, I mean, I wouldn't like to make a judgment on that. You know, if you as the artist find something that works for you, then that's great. I personally tend to prefer pictures of people looking serious or thoughtful or introspective. So things that are a bit more on the you know, negative side of the emotional spectrum. But I mean, I posted another self-portrait today where I'm smiling, which is kind of unusual for me. It took a lot of effort, and I think I found a color palette to go with that sort of worked with the mood. So there's definitely no rule on it. With color grading, there's no rule. It's what works for you, what suggests the mood that you want to create, and does the expression of the person go along with that? Yeah. And it could be that you could make a career of doing things where they completely contrast, and that's your thing. That could also be really interesting to look at, where you've got people in a particularly somber looking composition and they're ecstatic with laughter. That could be quite an interesting thing as well. It depends what speaks to you as an artist.
Yeah, it's about creating the art, I guess, isn't it? The art that you want to create.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Beth.
Thank you.
So Barry, another good question. Some good ones coming in. Thank you, guys. Interested to hear about the collaboration process with your clients. Do you have a pre-shoot consultation with the client to understand the desired look, theme, and/or usage of the images, and that leads to a storyboard type approach, or something different? So how do you arrive at the look, basically? Do you show previous examples, then create it? What does that collaboration look like?
So it kind of depends on the client. People who want to talk to me beforehand, I'm definitely up for that, and we do. I don't generally create storyboards. You get the gist of the style of my work from looking at my website, looking at my social media, and if you've already taken the step to book me, then clearly there's something about that sort of speaks to you and is something that you think is going to fit for your uses. It definitely comes up every time during the shoot that we talk more about where they intend to use the pictures and that kind of stuff. But it's not a standard part of my workflow that I go through a consultation. Some people just simply don't want that. They click the button, put in their credit card details, and show up at the studio, and that's fine because I'm confident that in order to get to the booking page, they must have seen my work, because that's the front page of the website. So they know what they're getting. Broadly speaking, they know what they're going to get when they come to the studio. And if they don't like that, then they won't have booked me.
They say, "Can I have an Ivan, please?"
It would be nice to get to that level. Yeah.
Okay. Great question coming up from Ted. So, curious about the table setup, specifically what kind of table it is, and how do you have it set up for people with different heights?
Okay. Well, I'm gonna stand up now, and if you're following me on this camera here that I'm pointing to, I'm just going to lower it a little so that you can see. This is the table, and it's a rolling stand, so it's adjustable in height if I need it to be.
So that's a standard, the sort of flat-legged type rolling stand, Ivan. Is it like Tether Tools or one of those?
Let me see if I can get the camera a little lower.
I see. I can see it in the other angle. A bit more.
Yeah. Can you see it there? If I do that. And all I did was
put a plate in.
Oops. Yeah. Got a piece of board and bolted a wall plate into it, and then that pops in the top.
Perfect.
Like so. And that gives me the adjustability. Before I put that together, I just had a fixed height table, and I was using just bits of, the foam rubber stuff that you get in inside flight cases. I had loads of sheets of that, and they're about 1 inch thick. And I would just, if somebody needed to be higher up in the chair, stick 3 or 4 of those under their bum, and they'd sit higher and more comfortable. So there are ways to do it. It's definitely easier to get an adjustable chair than an adjustable table, but then you run into other problems if they've got short legs or long legs or, whatever.
Good. Thank you. Good to know there's a simple solution behind there, subject to a little bit of modification. So, have a quick one from Beth here. So, Ivan, do you ever have trouble deciding on what final edit you like best? Sometimes I work with several different approaches to a shot and get stuck on which one I like best.
Yeah, for sure. I think that comes under the heading of like editing fatigue. When you've been looking at an image for a long time, it's difficult to see it objectively. So I certainly make a lot of use of the practice of just leaving it for a bit and going and doing something else. What I like to do is I put it up on the screen, full screen, as large as possible, and then just wander over to another bit of the studio for 5 minutes, and then turn around and look at it and try and feel, okay, what does that feel like now? Does that feel too warm or too cold or too contrasty or whatever? And the other thing is that I have a hidden page on my website where I've got loads of stuff uploaded, and I just chuck what I think might be the final version. I put that in there along with all of the other examples of my work, and just see, does it fit well in with my other work, or does it stand out for the wrong reasons? And that will give me a clue as to where to go with the edit. And that's one of the downsides of color grading, is that it's limitless. So
it's a rabbit hole.
Have to, you do have to kind of set a cutoff point. But sometimes that's the benefit of working for clients, because you've promised to deliver it on Friday. So kind of the final edit that's made on Thursday night, that's going to be the final edit, So
it's good to know that happens to you too, that you sometimes,
Yeah. Well, it's all subjective, right? There isn't, I'm not representing an objective truth with my photography. It's not like this is exactly scientifically what the person looked like. It's more about a mood and a feeling and how best to represent that. So a lot of subjectivity means that, it could never be finished. You could keep going and keep editing for all eternity. You have to, So, it's only finished when you say, I'm done.
Okay. Thank you.
I was conscious I wasn't holding the sub then. Crew joke, crew point. So from Eric, I watched your video on color grading recently and was wondering how it's evolved. I'd never thought of using layers of texture and color, but seeing your workflow, it seems like a no-brainer. How did you get to the process to where you have it now?
So that came about, I can't remember if I'd seen somebody else doing it, or I bought a pack of overlay textures from some resource somewhere that I found on Google. I can't remember the name. And my initial thought was, oh, these look crap. And then I thought, well, hold on a minute. I'm just putting them on and doing nothing with them. Let's fiddle around and see what we can do with them. So I started using different blend modes, and then I started actually thinking about just blending it into the shadows or the highlights or the midtones or combinations of those three. And just through sort of play and experimentation, I worked out this look that I kind of liked by using that combination of golden yellows and kind of olive greens and putting them together. And so at that point in that pack that I'd bought, there were sort of like 30 overlay textures, and I was using 2 of them. I thought, well, I can't just use the same 2 over and over again. And then I realized that it's the easiest thing in the world to create. You just go and take a picture of a texture, find a texture that you like and take a picture of it. I'm a photographer. It's kind of easy, right? And so from there, I started creating my own. And I've got a library of about 40 or 50 that I use currently. Slight variations on a theme, some with more texture, some with less texture, some with more of a vignette, some with more kind of variation, different points where the brightest bit is. And they just give me a bit of, subtle variation when I'm using them on my images.
Cool. Okay. So David, question, and David, I'm glad I read your correction, because I thought that might have been another product. So on the verge of buying some gravity backdrops, which have been on the wish list forever. Any other recommendations before I spend the money?
So for backdrops, I have 3 recommendations depending on where you are in the world. One is Artery Backdrops, who are based in Serbia. The one that I've got behind me here and the others that hang permanently in my studio are from Artery. There's also a good friend of mine in Lisbon, in Portugal, Pedro Jorge, and his company is called Nifty Backdrops, and he makes great designs there. And in Canada, Parker Backdrops. I've got one from them, but I'd like to buy more, but the shipping from Canada for something that big and heavy and irregularly sized is crazy. So if you're this side of the Atlantic, that may be prohibitive for you. But honestly, you know, if you find a deal or you find you know, a style, a design that you like, you know, you can get them from almost anywhere. There are tons of good producers. Those names I've given you are just the ones that I know and use.
Good, thank you. And Ian's commented further down that he bought Artery on your choice, and it's been very impressed with them. So, okay, thank you. From Gary, taking on a studio can be a massive commitment in the early stages of starting a head shop portrait business. How important is it to have that base? How important is the location? And at what stage did you commit to it?
Yeah, I think the answer to that is going to be very individual. So for me, the way I work, I wanted to have all the time access to my space, and the compromise was that, or is that, I live in my studio. So it's, you know, it would be crazy to have 2 London rents going on. So I pay 1 rent and that covers me for my studio and my living space. For some people that really doesn't work because they like to have the separation between being at work and being at home. I really don't like to have that separation. You know, if I've got an idea at 2 o'clock in the morning and I can't sleep, I want to get in the studio and try it out. It's definitely true that people who take on a separate studio, like a commercial premises studio, before they've got the income to support it, they're taking quite a major risk. And as with all risks, if you pull it off, fantastic. But if you don't, it can be the death of a business. So depending on where you're located, there's plenty of ways to get around that. If you're in London and you're in the Freelancer Club, for example, you can have free use, £0 use of the B space, which is a small studio above the A space, which is at Angel Islington, just up the road from here. So if that's your situation and you're in London, I would recommend going that route, because you can get access to a reasonable sized space when you need it for free, but you're not paying the rent. And there are other ways around that. Another thing to do is just to build it into your pricing and pass on that cost to your client. Or you can go the route that many other head shop photographers do, which is to only shoot outdoors. Not such a great option if you're in London, unless you like damp railway arches and people with red noses from wind and rain. But there you go.
Thank you. So another one from Denise. Do you offer a hair and makeup artist for the client? And if so, do they do that at your studio? If they do, then that's time at your studio and your expense. How do you work without reabsorbing costs and time, etc.?
Okay. So I don't offer it as standard. It's not part of the package, but if people want hair and makeup, I have people that I can recommend, and the client deals with the hair and makeup artists directly, so that money doesn't come through me. In terms of the time, I'm totally fine with that. I mean, I don't have a time limit on my sessions. It takes as long as it takes to get whatever we want to get. So if people want to have makeup done as part of the session, they come in and they're having their makeup done. I can get on with some editing or make a cup of tea and have a chat while they're doing it, or whatever. The time is really not the problem. I mean, I generally work with one client a day. Generally, it doesn't take all day, but if it does, that's fine. There's room for that. I think it's a problem to incorporate that as a standard thing in your package, because not everybody wants it. And then you've got all of the sort of admin hassles of you receiving money that you're then paying out to a third party. If you've got a bigger business where you've got like assistants to take care of and stuff like that, then that's probably no extra hassle. But you know, I'm a sole trader, so the less money that's passing through my hands to go to other people, the better. It's just cleaner and less complicated for me to do it that way.
Good. Okay. And it was nifty backdrops, wasn't it, Pedro's?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So one from Gary. You mentioned in something I've seen that performing arts clients make up 90% of your clients. I guess most are fairly receptive to your artistic style. With personal branding being more of a thing, is there scope to be more inventive with corporate and personal clients?
So I mean, this really comes back to the sort of the age-old argument that only exists amongst photographers of like what's a headshot and what's a portrait and what's a personal branding image. And my take on that is, if you use it for personal branding, it's a personal branding image. If you use it as a headshot, it's a headshot. I think we need to be very clear with our clients about what we're offering, and the best way to do that is through your portfolio. You know, if a client has got no previous experience hiring a photographer, and I start talking to them about the differences between those three types of images, do they care? Do they need to know? Probably not. It's much easier to say, these are the things that I shoot. This is what my work looks like. Do you like it? Yes. Okay. Hire me. No. Okay. You can find another photographer. I think that's the simplest way to go about it. So I think we really need to get out of our clients' way and stop making decisions for them about what they want. You know, if you go in with the preconceived idea that because this woman is an accountant, she doesn't want an image that looks dramatic, well, then that's one less image that you're going to sell. And if that's the style that you like to shoot, you're going to sell less images, and you're not going to be doing the work that you want to do. So it's a lose-lose for you. If you go in and say, these are the things that I can shoot and you've hired me for it, so let's do it, you will likely sell more images, and you will get more satisfaction from doing the work that you really want to do. So win-win.
Cool. Okay, one from Guillaume. Hi, Ivan. The self-portrait you commented on your last session here was a 2-light setup, if I remember well. It looks fantastic and very recognizable as your work, but I know you also use up to 7 lights for the same kind of shot. It also looks fantastic. What makes you want to make it so advanced when 2 lights work as good and consistent? And we talked about up to 7 on the interview on the podcast, didn't we?
Yeah.
It's how you want to build it. Really.
Yeah, it's exactly that. So, you know, adding more lights for the sake of adding more lights, there's no value to that. You know, you're just using more electricity and having more wires on the floor to trip over. It doesn't impress anyone. It's about problem solving. So if you've got an image that looks good to you with 1 light, don't add any more. But if there's an area of the image that's too dark, you need to add a 2nd light. And if there's another area of the image that's too dark that can't be solved by the 2nd light, you need to add the 3rd light, and so on and so on and so on. And you know, obviously, if you're using like a lot of lights, 5, 6, 7, many of them are doing a very small and very specific job. They're not contributing a whole lot. So you could say the difference between using 6 lights and 7 lights is imperceptible. Yeah, you could argue that, but if you're looking at it and you're working and you've got the time to go to that level of detail and attention, you can see the difference. And that's really the motivation for it. You know, if you're looking at it and thinking, but if I just had a bit more of a highlight on the top of the shoulder, okay, then bring some light in from the top, just slightly behind them, angled forwards, and get a little rim on the shoulder. Does it turn it from being, you know, absolute trash into being an absolute masterpiece? Probably not. But does it satisfy you as a photographer? Does it satisfy you as a creative person? That's the question to ask. When you're talking about doing your own work, so you're not working with a client, maybe you approach it as a technical challenge, as a practice, like how many lights can I use? And that's, you know, that's a good exercise to go through, but it's an exercise. Don't expect that to produce work that you put in your portfolio. That's more of a technical learning how to balance all of these different light sources together. And it's definitely important that we do technical exercises. Same with anything, right? You know, musicians have to practice their scales. It's the same kind of thing. But you wouldn't want to go and watch a performance of a bunch of musicians practicing scales. That's kind of boring.
Good, thank you. From Beth, Ivan, did you have a time when you transitioned from more traditional looking portraits to your now iconic style? Did you slowly start to integrate the new look into your portfolio? Did you give clients the option of a regular look or the more stylized look? Or did you just switch all at once to the new look? Or did you just start out with this look from the beginning? So it's all about the look. And
yeah,
you got there.
So similar to the earlier question, I mean, I definitely fell into that trap of assuming that people wouldn't want me to do the work that I really wanted to do. They would want something a bit more conservative. And it just started happening that I was posting the more, you know, higher contrast, more color grading, textured work on Instagram, and people were coming into the studio, and I was assuming that they wanted, you know, a white background, simple, sort of high key kind of look, because that's what I had on my website. And bit by bit, I cottoned on that people were actually finding me on Instagram and then going to the website to book, and they were booking me because of the work that they saw on Instagram. So, you know, it sort of, I found my audience, if you like, and, you know, I rarely do a session where I don't shoot a bunch of different styles, but the stuff that I put out is the stuff that I'm most excited about, because I want to get more opportunity to shoot the work that I want to shoot, and, you know, the old rule, show what you want to shoot. So, you know, I definitely do go in to shoot standard white background headshots for corporate clients. I don't put a lot of that on Instagram because artistically for me, it's not as interesting. And I think artistically for my audience, not as interesting. And because I don't really want to chase after that work as much. So that's the rationale.
Thank you. That's good to know for those of us who might want to start transitioning into doing more, as you say, sort of artistic work, as well as more, you know, traditional work, like how you do that transition.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, you know, people can't book you people can't buy a product that they don't know exists. Yeah.
Right.
So you have to show them, this is what I do, this is what I love doing. Do you want to book me for it? That's essentially what you're saying when you put stuff out. So if you're only showing the work that you think people will like, that's not really what you want to do, you're never going to make that transition. And of course, there's no guarantee that if you do the work that you really want to do, you will find an audience for it. But there is a guarantee that if you don't show it, you'll never find an audience. So you have to do that over time.
Yep. Yeah, you have to be brave enough to try.
Yeah, I mean, but if you're creating the work, like, why are you creating it if you're not going to show it to anyone? You know.
Yeah.
The work that happens is you get.
I'm sorry. I was just, and I'm sorry to just jump in here, Phil, but it was a quick question. Do you find that one side of your work feeds the other? The more creative side feeds the corporate, or vice versa?
Yeah, I mean, listen, it's all pictures of people's faces, right? Ultimately, like, if I do, 15 hours of color grading and texture overlay on a really dull looking face, it's still going to be a picture of a really dull looking face. If I've got an interesting expression from an interesting looking person and I present it as white background, black and white, one light, that can be as compelling an image as if I've got 7 lights and 15 different texture layers and all the colors of the rainbow on it. People are only going to be engaged by an expression. It's not abstract art. It's not just about color and texture. It's about a person. You are supposed to look at the picture and feel some response to the person, and that can be done in a simple black and white one light image, or it can be done, by filling a stadium with floodlights and all kinds of equipment. It just depends. But you have to have the ability to get the photographer to connect with the subject and get an expression. If you haven't got that, then it's just a technical exercise and there's nothing.
Good. Okay. From Ian, outside of experimentation, are there any places where you credit for learning various aspects of lighting?
Oh, okay. I'll try not to leave anyone out. So when I first started getting into lighting, which was, after getting into digital photography, I then subsequently started learning about lighting. David Hobby was the first resource that I used there, Strobes.com. His blog I found really, really, I understood it. It connected with me. Zach Arias as well, around that time, was another really useful resource on the side of lighting and sort of technical, although I think he makes a point of saying he's not very technical, but there you go. And then from there, I mean, with the obvious exception of Peter Hurley, from there it's just been bits and pieces. Once you get to a certain point, you can, look at a behind the scenes shot of a photographer and say, okay, right, I've got it. I see what's going on there, and that's enough for me to then, try and recreate it or do something similar and tweak it in the studio. So at that point, everything becomes a lesson. That sounds a bit well, I don't want to overstate it, but like right now I'm looking at the way the sun's coming through the blinds on the floor over there. It's like, oh yeah, okay, I could replicate that by using some bits of card to flag off my key light and then having enough soft fill to make the edges not so harsh. And it's, once you've got that sort of understanding of light, you can just play with it, I think. So everything becomes a potential learning experience.
Okay, good. From Kerry, what technical exercises would you most recommend? That's an interesting.
Well, the best one is if you've got, it could be anything. I mean, I'll demonstrate with this because I've got it here on the desk, but you could use just like a normal torch or flashlight or whatever you want to call it, and just stand in front of a mirror and move it around and see what it does to the shadows and highlights on your own face. That is a hugely important technical exercise because you understand the shape of your own face better than anybody else's, and that therefore is the sort of the number one technical exercise for lighting, I would say. Beyond that, it depends what area you're talking about. I mean, I mentioned before, if you're interested in using more than one light, you can set a technical exercise based on the number of lights you're going to use. Find a way to get a third light in there that doesn't create a need for a fourth light, or find a way to get a fourth light in there that doesn't create a need for a fifth light. And that can be based on any number of sort of sources of inspiration. Another really valuable one is just to get a picture by somebody else that you really like and try and replicate it. That's hugely valuable. It's the way that, you know, artists have learned throughout the centuries, right? You learn by trying to copy the work of a master, you know, somebody whose work you admire, and along the way you work out techniques that work for you, and you work out a bit more about what you like and what you don't like, and eventually that morphs into your own style, even if it's, you know, very much based on the work of somebody else who you studied. But yeah, I think depending on the level that you're at, those are the three sort of main technical exercises that I would recommend.
Cool. We had a very late joiner, Mr. Richard Barron, and someone else joining now, James. So we're actually, we've now got another question coming. And I think it's a very, very good question because it's very topical. And we've seen different things on the internet already about it. Do you think socially distanced studio portrait work is likely to be a non-starter? It might depend on where you are in the globe.
Well, it depends on what you mean by studio portrait work. I mean, people that absolutely need to have their photo taken for an ID badge, you know, you can stand them against the wall 50 feet away if you've got a long enough lens, and that's absolutely fine. Creating something where you've got a connection with a person, you know, humans require physical proximity in order to establish a connection. We're dumb, so we can't tell the, you know, right now my limbic brain thinks Phil is 2 foot away from me just because his face is on a screen 2 foot away from me. So we need a level of physical proximity in order to create that connection. So personally, I don't think that social distancing within a photography studio is a very good idea at all. And I also don't think that people are going to have getting a portrait super high up on their list if they're still worried about leaving the house. I think once I feel comfortable enough to let a dentist put his hands in my mouth, once I feel comfortable enough to let a barber spend half an hour with his hands all over my head, I'll feel comfortable enough to stand a meter or so away from a photographer and have my picture taken. You know, it's a question of priorities. It's a question of people's level of comfort. And I don't think that, you know, implementing a feeling of, you know, I'm going to put you in a perspex box and take a picture of you from a distance and make you feel like a zoo animal, I don't think that's conducive to my style of portraiture. It may well give birth to another style of portraiture where it is very sort of, you know, looking at people through a microscope as if they are lab rats or something. But, you know, if it's based on necessity, it certainly can be done. I don't have an interest in doing it myself.
Yeah, I think David's put on there, you know, outside with the 70-200 should be fine, but inside with an 85mm, not so much. And we've seen some of that, I think.
Inside.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can be inside with a 70-200, but like you're going to have to shout at them. How are you going to create any kind of connection if they're at the other end of the room, you know? It's a different style. Okay,
so we've got about 10 minutes left and a hard stop at 4 p.m. That's right, Ivan, I think, isn't it? So, yeah, so Barry's just saying moving his studio to his garage with a longer lens. 6 foot away outside isn't too bad. Yeah. I mean, there's also the almost ethics of, you know, whether we're allowed to do these things, different rules in different countries, I think, at the moment.
Of course, if there are regulations, then you absolutely should follow those. Otherwise, you risk fines and reputational damage and all those kind of things, which is not a
Being
good
that
thing
guy.
to go into. But I just think a whole part of it is that you build up trust and you build up a relationship with the client during the shoot. It's at the point where I'm going to be walking over and fixing their hair or adjusting their clothes in the same way that you would allow, like I say, a hairdresser or a barber to be very physically close to you in order to provide the service that you've hired them for. And I think portrait photographers sit, or at least people that work in the same style that I do, sit very squarely in that category. Physical proximity and connection is a huge part of it.
Okay, thank you. Question from Gary. Have you done any personal projects, or do you have any ambition to?
Projects to me sounds like like a series of work with a specific intention, and know that that's not something that I've done. I do personal work, as in working, taking pictures of somebody who is not a client with a specific intention of creating a look that I want to create, usually with the intention of then being able to put that in my portfolio and subsequently getting hired to recreate it. But the things that I was mentioning before, the sort of technical exercises, that's where I would do personal work. I've got a new piece of kit, or I've got a new idea about, I wonder what happens if I do this to that bit of kit and try and use it in this way. I tend to prefer doing those kind of things when I'm not being paid, because the pressure's off and you can just experiment and play, and if nothing comes from it, it's absolutely fine. So that's the kind of personal work that I do. I haven't done anything that was sort of a big preconceived project that I set out to do. Like right now in lockdown, I've shot a bunch of self-portraits. I now have a series of self-portraits, but I didn't start with the intention of doing that. It was necessity. Like, who else am I going to take a picture of? There's only me here. And as the weeks have gone on, I've taken more and more pictures of me. So, now it's a series. That's the way it works.
Good. Any other questions from anybody? I'll fire one at you, Ivan. If you had to take three photographic items onto a desert island with you, what would they be?
3 photographic items?
Yes.
Well, a full frame body and a 50mm lens, and I want a light and a modifier. Oh man, that's tough. Well, I mean, the modifier is useless without the light, and I could probably put something together with banana leaves. So I'd just go with the light, a body, a lens, and a light, and I'm away. But it would definitely be a 50mm lens.
50mm
for sure.
That's the one.
Yeah.
So here we go. What's your favourite restaurant in London? Please ask me anything.
Yeah, it is. Ask me anything. My favourite restaurant in London is no longer open. It didn't close because of the COVID thing. It closed down, I think, a year ago. Great Queen Street. It's been so long since I've been to a restaurant. I can't think of another one. Damn! It's in sort of Holborn, by Holborn Police Station, and I'm struggling to remember the name of it. Nah, it's gone. Noble Rot. There you go. Noble Rot on, I forget the name of the street. It's a little pedestrianised street off of Theobald's Road in Holborn. It's very good.
Okay.
But they're closed currently, of course.
Yeah. And James's suggestion on the tropical desert island is to make a coconut beauty dish.
There you go. You could, yeah.
Or a series of them. Find a way.
Very, very small, but it's got the nice. I like the white interior of the beauty dish. I prefer that to the silver. So yeah, gives a nice softer light. I prefer that.
Cool. So 5 minutes left. Did everyone get the details of the backdrops earlier. If not, I don't know if we can dig out the links or pull them. I think I saw a lot of people writing down at the time. So it was Artery was one of them, and
Yes.
Nifty was another.
Artery backdrops, Nifty backdrops, and Parker backdrops. They've all got Instagram accounts. And yeah, off the top of my head, I don't remember if they're .com, .net, whatever. But if you look them up on Instagram, you will be steered towards their websites if you wish to make a purchase.
Yvonne's just asked if there's any UK companies, or do those companies have UK distribution, or any of them?
I don't have any canvases from any of the UK producers. There are UK producers, and I mean, as I said before, you know, there's lots of companies that make great backdrops. I'm just giving the recommendations of ones that I own and use, and therefore, you know, I'm happy to recommend. But there's new companies popping up all the time, because it's, you know, anyone who's got a bit of sort of artistic ability and the inclination to work in that area, you know, it's a viable business, let's say, for artists, if they've got the space to create canvases. So there are definitely producers in the UK. I just don't have anything from any of them, so I won't endorse them, as it were.
Okay. You can do it while social distancing.
Okay, quick one from David. So I'm guessing studio training is out of the question for the foreseeable. Are you doing anything online?
So I have always offered in studio training, and that will become available again, you know, as soon as we're allowed to do that. So at the same time that I start offering shoots in studio as well. I do offer my training online one-to-one. Of course, there are some limitations around that. We can't do an actual shoot, but the ones that I've done so far online, with either use this setup where I've got 2 cameras and I demonstrate lighting techniques on myself, you know, whatever, walk around doing this kind of thing, or it's more on the sort of post-production side of things, where just a video connection where we can share screens and talk through post-production workflows. That one works perfectly fine online. In fact, you know, there's really no reason to come into the studio if that's the area that you're interested in. But in all cases, what I do with people that are interested in that is we have a phone call first. That's one where I definitely do have a consultation to find out, you know, what they're looking to get from it, and based on that, I can put together a plan and decide on, you know, how long we're going to need, an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, whatever, and then we go from there. So if you're interested in that, you can ping me after the show, the broadcast, what is this thing, the live stream event, and we can talk about that. No obligation consultation.
Which is rapidly coming to the end. So we're just talking about Elgato quickly. Denise asking if I'm using an Elgato for streaming this, or is it just a straight Zoom connection on 2 devices?
Yeah, I'm just using the webcam on my iMac and the webcam on my iPad currently. I don't have an Elgato. The time that I decided I might want to buy one was when they'd already sold out. So it's like, yeah, okay. I think they've got some back in stock now, but I'm like, it's fine. I don't need shallow depth of field and gorgeous imagery for this. This is good enough for this. So it's fine.
Nice one. Okay, I think we need to wrap it up now because we're almost out of time. Thanks everyone for your questions. Really good set of questions. Thank you, Ivan. And
thank you, Phil.
Hopefully we've got all your contact details for any possible follow-ups.
Yeah, if you don't have my contact details, Ivan Weiss London, WEISS London, put those 3 words into a search engine and you will find me.
Cool. Great. Thank you. And see you all again sometime soon.
Okay. Can you hit the button, Phil? Shut it down.
Try. Shut it down. If I could, I would. Oh, here we go. Leave meeting. End meeting.